Last week was a lot of fun. I hope you had the opportunity to be a part of it in some way, whether you were participating or just joining with us or serving or whatever it may have been. It was a lot of fun. We're not sure how many folks we had. We cooked for over 500 and we barely had anything left. And so either we all ate a lot or we had roughly that many people. So it was a good day. I really want to say thank you to you all as a church for being a part of that and helping to put that on. I particularly want to thank a few folks. First with the staff. Our staff did a great job of really planning up to that and getting us in a good position for that. I specifically want to thank Chrissy because she took on the whole food side of it and just did an awesome job with it. Yeah, give her a big thank you. And big thank yous to the Pettits and the Smiths who jumped in and helped us with the food service there kind of towards the end and helped really make it go smooth. Thank you for you all for being generous with that. I want to thank the First Impressions teams. Y'all were outside all day directing traffic and things like that. Thank you inside, and then the ushers with just more people. And so thank you for all of your work. The security team stayed late and worked all afternoon. Thank you for that. And then, of course, any of you that brought trunks, thank you for doing that. I think we had 25 trunks, 24 trunks, something like that, which is really a good number of trunks. It was a lot of fun. The kids walked away with a ton of candy, and it was a great day. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really planned that event with two goals. Our first goal was to create an invitable event where people would be invited to come and hear the gospel. And Jerry Schimmel did a great job last week. I hope you got to hear him. If you didn't, please go look it up online. His story is incredible, and he did a great job. But that was the first goal, was to have an encounter with the gospel and be presented with the gospel. The second was to create an event that would invite people into our community as a church, into who we are, and introduce them to us. And, we think that those two things have to go together. The gospel and our faith and how we live out our faith goes with one another, goes with our community and how we interact with one another. We cannot separate those two and have them separate, but together. And so when we invite people to church, when we invite them to hear the gospel, to be a part of what we're doing, that's what we're inviting them into, is both of these, living our faith and doing it together. And what's interesting is, as Americans, we're not bent that way. As Americans, we love our independence, right? We love the fact that I can do what I want, what's best for me. And we fought wars for that. We've spent all of our country's history really championing our independence. And in many ways, our independence is fantastic, right? Our independence is being tested in all new ways now, isn't it? But when we think about our faith, independence looks different. It's no longer this idea that we can live our faith separate, independent from one another. That's not what God calls us to. If we were to take and present that back to Jesus as he was teaching and preaching about his kingdom here in Matthew and in his time, it would have been a paradigm he would not have understood. This idea of our faith being separate from our relationships is a perspective that he would not have agreed with. It is not biblical. And we like to live this life where I have my faith and you have your faith, and the two may never intersect in a meaningful way. They may never intersect in a way to which I can challenge you about your faith, or you can challenge me, or I can call you out on a behavior that doesn't align with what you say you believe, right? Or these sort of things where I can reveal a struggle of mine and you can come alongside me and help me. We don't like that because we've believed this lie that you don't talk about, politics and money and religion, right? And so we keep our lives separate and we try to live our faith independent from one another. And that's not what God is calling us to. And as we're going to see here, as we look into Matthew chapter 7 today, we're going to see this paradigm be confronted. We're going to be in chapter 7, start with verse 1 today. We're heading down the home stretch of this series, the series we've called What If Jesus Was Serious? And every week we've been confronted with a new teaching of Jesus that makes us scratch our heads and say, was he really serious? because it's so like contradictory to our culture, and today's going to be one of those examples. I want to let you know that we got today and 3 more weeks in this series, and we'll finish up at Thanksgiving. In 2 weeks, on the 21st, you're going to want to be here because our new district superintendent, Colby Kinzer, will be here. He's from Kansas City, and he'll be here visiting with us, his first time here since he's took over as district superintendent, and he's going to be preaching for us the 21st. And what I was really impressed with is I kind of threw him a curveball, so to speak. And normally when they come and speak, they speak on whatever they want to, right? And I said, hey, we're going through this series, and it'd be great for my planning if you could preach on the Sermon on the Mount. And he's like, yeah, I'll do that. I was like, you're serious? Yeah, I'll do that. I said, okay, it's the passage on false prophets. Is that okay? And he was like, sure. And so he'll be here in 3 weeks, and he's going to continue our series. He has accepted a tough assignment on that Sunday. And so you're going to want to be here the 21st when he's here. He's a great guy. I'm excited to have him here. All right, so let's jump into chapter 7. By the way, you're going to see here 2 teachings of Jesus that are very commonly quoted or referred to, okay? But what you're going to find is that at least one of them is totally taken out of context and misused and abused, okay? So just look out for it, and when we get there, you'll know it, and I think you'll see the disconnect we usually make. All right, so here we are, chapter 7, verse 1. Do not judge, so that you will not be judged. For by the standard you judge, you will be judged. And the measure you use will be the measure you receive. So this little 2-sentence passage all hinges on what it means to judge. What is it that he's saying when he says, do not judge, or how you will be judged? And now we have different encounters with judges in our lives. We have judges at the Olympics, right? That's not the kind of judge he's talking about. We have judges that wear black robes and sit on the bench, and they make decisions on complicated legal matters, right? It's not what we're talking about. When we talk about judge sometimes, we talk about the difference between right and wrong, okay? An action, was it right or was it wrong? And that isn't exactly what he's talking about here, okay? He's taking that and taking it a step deeper, a step more personal. The judge statement being used here, the term being used here, is actually a statement of pronouncing judgment, particularly condemnation, upon another person. It's about you've encountered somebody in some way. Maybe you've had an experience, an interaction, something they've said, something you've seen of them, some kind of action you've seen them take, whatever it may be. You've encountered this person, and you're not so much judging what they did or what they said or what's happened. You're judging them. Okay? You get the difference? You're judging them. You're taking this encounter, whatever it is, and you're throwing this blanket of judgment upon all of them. As a person, I'm judging you. You said this, you did this, I saw this, you voted this way, you have this perspective on this topic, whatever it might be, and so now I'm judging you in a kind of all-inclusive way. Does that make sense? You see the difference? All of us are really good at this, aren't we? Right? Like we're too good at witnessing somebody or something and judging them. I actually had this experience not long ago, maybe a month ago. Somebody came to me and they said, hey, have you met so-and-so, this other person? They're new to town. Have you met him? I said, yeah, I've met him. They talked to him a few times. They seemed like a nice person. They said, oh, I didn't think so. It's like, oh, really? Well, why is that? They said, I had this one conversation, and I did not like him. So, okay, I would encourage you to go have another conversation. I could get to know them a little more because I actually did enjoy that person. What little encounters I've had, I've enjoyed them. But that person was judging, right? Like they didn't want anything to do. They were totally discounting this person based on one conversation. They were placing judgment upon them. And so it's this idea of it's being personal. It's not per se about the actions. It's just being personal with each other, that personally, I am judging you in this significant way. What's interesting about this is we are complex people. Every one of us are. We are how we are for a reason, right? Our past experiences, our past influences, the things we have done, the things that have happened to us. There are thousands of things that go into making us who we are. And when we judge one another, we're discounting all of that. We're ignoring all of that. We are boiling this person, whoever it is, down to this one thing, this one encounter that we had with them. And we are boiling all of them, taking out all of the complexities, boiling it down to just that. That's a rude person. They did this. They said that. Because of this, one thing out of all this complexity of who they are, that's who they are, and therefore I'm judging them. And so we totally take out the complexities of life. And instead of actually knowing the person, we make assumptions. We make generalizations. We don't have a lot of facts. We have a few facts, and we make up the rest with our own slant, of course. We fill in the gaps however we see fit. We start to assume their motives. We assume their heart. We assume their experience. We assume their understanding of the situation. We make all these assumptions so that it justifies our blanket of judgment on them. We make all these assumptions about them when we would never want that about us, would we? Because we all know how complex we are. We know that, hey, the reason why I'm angry is because this has happened, right? This is in my background. This is how I'm bent. This is the influences of my life. This is why I tend to make these mistakes. I don't care about yours, though. I'm just going to judge you. It's like if yesterday I went to Darcy Rambley's house, and he and Jaron and I, the three of us, were building a shed for Darcy. And it's like if I went to Darcy's house and I took my tape measure, and my tape measure had 64ths marked on it. And I went to Darcy's house, and I was like measuring Darcy, and I was measuring his shed and measuring his life. And I'm like, oh, you're off by a 64th. And then I went back to my house, and I pulled out my tape measure, and there were no markings at all other than just feet. And I'm like, yeah, it's about a foot, close enough. You see the double standard? We create this double standard of how we look at one another. We use a different weight scale than when we look at ourselves. Because we understand the fact that I'm complex, and I like the grace that comes with that and the benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to your life, judgment. It's just a lot easier that way. And so he's saying, do not judge one another unless that's how you want to be judged. Now, in this, we're making a bunch of assumptions, but here's one big assumption we make when we act this way. We make the assumption that God is standing here next to us, and he is somehow confirming our point of view. And it's like the two of us are standing here, me and God beside each other, looking at this person we've just condemned. And I'm like, I'm judging you. And like God's standing there going, yeah, I know. Can you believe it? It's like, yeah, you get it. They don't. Can you believe it? It's like, that's the assumption we're making, is that somehow our standard is the right one. Our standard is the gold standard that all should be judged by. And we have this like vision that God's standing there beside us giving credence to our position. See, that person was rude. You're not supposed to be rude, and so that's a bad person. I'm judging them. You make this statement, and you feel affirmed in your judgment because of course I'm right. God's right here with me. You see the assumption this is, right? We're almost placing ourselves and our own views, our own opinions, our own perspective on the world in God's chair. Talk about an assumption, huh? How arrogant that is. But that's what we do when we judge one another. Is we just place this judgment out of a place of arrogance and a place of me against you, and you did this, and so we're against each other, and I'm judging you. What a position we've put ourselves in. Now, I love what Jesus does here next. Okay, so here's verse 3. He's gonna give us a word picture to go with this. Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but fail to see the beam of wood in your own. I love how it's a question with a period on the end, really. He's using this great illustration, right? You have a speck. Your friend has a speck in their eye. And when I picture speck, here's what I'm picturing. Go home, pull out your furnace filter, shake it in the air, and watch what comes out. That's a speck, okay? Now, notice there's no denial about what's in your friend's eye. There's a speck in their eye, right? And we all know that if you went home and you shook that furnace filter and you got some of it in your eye, you'd be like, ugh, right? Because it's there. There's no denying that there's a speck in their eye. But then what is it that's in your eye? A beam of wood. We see the contrast, right? The idea is like a structural beam for a building. A beam of wood is in your eye. So picture this. So your friend has a speck in their eye. You are walking around with this beam of wood sticking out of your eye. We see the contrast, right? We laugh. We think like this is a funny image of us walking around with this beam of wood, right? And as we're laughing, we realize that he just punched us in the gut. Because it's your eye that has the beam of wood. It's your friend's eye that has the speck. Ouch. I don't like that one. It's this contrast. This picture, this kind of hyperbolic, if you will, almost absurd picture of the contrast between us to help drive home this point. And he's going to keep going with it here, because in verse 4, he kind of takes it this step further. He says, or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye while there's a beam in your own? See, it's not just about the fact that you have a speck and I have a beam. It's about the fact that when I pronounce judgment upon you, what I think I'm trying to do is to help you. I think I'm trying to help you take the speck out of your eye by judging you. It's as if I hope if I judge you hard enough, you'll take it out yourself. But how can we really do that when we have this thing sticking out of our eye? There's an irony here in this illustration. What part of your body is the speck in? Your eye, right? That's your neighbor's eye, okay? What part of your body do you use to see your friend's speck? Your eye. What part of your body is the beam in yours? In your eye. So picture for a moment, this is in your eye. How well can I really see my friend's speck with this in my eye? Not very well, can I? The irony of this and the illustration he's giving, the solution he's offering, is that we don't see as well as we think. And that you are looking out and you're seeing one piece of brokenness in your friend, that speck. And you're making this complete judgment then based upon them, or on them based upon the speck, ignoring the complexities of life. And while you're doing that, you're ignoring the own complexities in your own life that cause you to see poorly. Because in the same way that person is complex, and there are all kinds of things that go into them, who they are, that cause them to have a speck in their eye, the same is true of you. There are all kinds of things in your life that cause you to have this beam in your eye. See, it's this check, if you will, for ourselves. It's this reminder that before we go examining our neighbor, before we go to our friends and we try to take their speck out, however lovingly or judgmental we might do that, before we do that, where are you and I at? See, this beam takes us directly back to the cross. It takes us directly back to what God has done for us. This beam is a reminder of just how broken you and I really are. We may not always see it because it's become normal to us. We're used to the beam. We walk around with it all the time and don't see it. But it's there. This beam takes us back to the grace we have been forgiven. Takes us back to what God has done for us, how he has transformed our lives. It takes us back to the fact that if we're really honest, we can't address this beam of wood ourselves. We need God, and we need one another. As big as this thing is, we don't even know it's there. Because we walk around judging one another, acting like it's not there. We've lost sight of it. It's become normal to us to have it sticking out. This beam humbles us. This beam changes our posture from a posture of arrogant judgment to a posture of humility. Coming before the cross first. Coming before the cross to acknowledge our beam. It changes our posture with one another because it's hard for me to condemn your speck when I'm carrying around a beam, no matter how well I think I can see your speck. See, this beam completely changes our posture. It changes our position. It changes our perspective. It takes us back to the gospel. And in verse 5, he says, "You hypocrite." Now, in my translation, there's an exclamation mark there. Now, there isn't in the Greek. There aren't exclamation marks in the Greek. But that's the force in which this is being said. He's saying that when we judge one another, when we pretend we don't have a beam, we're hypocrites. We're acting like something we're not. We're acting like we're God. We're acting like our perspective and our opinion is the standard. It's not. We're not in that chair. So we're hypocrites. First, remove the beam from your own eye. And then you can see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. I want you to picture that you go to an eye surgeon and you have something in your eye and the eye surgeon needs to take it out. But then you realize the eye surgeon walks into the room with a beam sticking out of theirs. Are you okay with this situation? When we arrogantly go to one another, when we don't check ourselves first, when we don't understand the gospel for ourselves first, that's what we're doing. And no matter how genuine-hearted we might be in that moment, we can't see very well. And Jesus is calling us to bring our relationships back to the cross. To take our faith and our relationships and put them together. See, we love to keep the two separated, right? And on occasion, we might act so or be in such a situation that our faith, your faith and my faith intersect in some way. But what God is calling us to do is to put the two together, that our relationships and our faith would go together. And that I would understand the gospel for me, and that I would go and I would address with Jesus this beam that is in my eye. And you would recognize that there's a beam in your eye too, and you would go and you would address it with him as well. And both of us, by the grace of Jesus, would understand our sin and our brokenness. And in that place of understanding, in that place of blessing, in that place of grace and humility, then we would come together and say, "Hey, buddy, I see a speck in your eye." And you'd say, "Yeah, it feels like a telephone pole to me." And you say, you got one in yours too." "Yeah, I know. I've been working on that one for a while. It's in there deep." And together, we would walk with our faith, our lives, all together in community. So instead of placing this other person across from us, and we're against them, and we picture us and God against them, instead of that, we would come around to the other side, and we would grab them with us, and we'd walk together, knowing that we're on the same team. The kingdom The kingdom perspective here isn't that we're to be against one another, it's that we're to be with one another in community. That as we see each other's specks, as we see our own logs, we would come together. And Jesus, working through one another, we'd see better. We would be healed. Now, verse 6, he ends this paragraph with, on the surface, what looks like he yanked the wheel to the left all of a sudden. Let's read it and you'll see what I mean. Do not give what is holy to dogs or throw your pearls before pigs. Otherwise, they will trample them under their feet and turn around and tear you to pieces. Huh? Where'd the dogs and the pigs come from? I thought we were talking about specks and beams here. I don't get it. I'd be the kid in the back of the class going, Jesus, I don't get it. Explain that one again. So let's see if we can get this. So we view our dogs as family, right? If you have a dog, it's part of the family almost, right? Probably comes in the house. If you're like most of us, mine sleeps on the floor right there. Not on the bed, on the floor. There's the boundaries. That's the boundary. On the floor right there, right? She follows me everywhere. Loyal as can be, right? She's part of the family. Not in first century Judaism. In first century Israel, dogs were like this wild packs that roamed the streets causing problems. The first time I really saw this and understood it was the first time I went to Romania. And we were told, don't pet the dogs. And I thought, okay. And I said, truly, like, don't pet the dogs. They said, dogs are all over the streets, and if one comes up to you, no matter how happy he looks, don't pet him. Because they'll bite you. They're not nice. Okay? And I remember our first night there in Costanza, we slept with the windows open, and so you could hear what was happening in the neighborhood. And numerous times in the middle of the night, I was woke up to dogs fighting in the streets and the alleys in the neighborhood. And that's just, they have a dog population there that roam the streets in these packs, and that's what they do, right? That's what's happening here. This isn't precious Fido at home. This is a pack of wild dogs. So Jesus is drawing this contrast between dogs and pigs, which, by the way, pigs were forbidden, right? Pigs were dirty. Pigs are not kosher. They don't eat pork. They don't have anything to do with anything that's pork. So two dirty animals in their minds. And contrasting that with what they say is holy and the pearls. Would you give something that's precious, something that's sacred, like a pearl, something that is important, would you give it to a dog or a pig? No. So what is the holy? What is the pearls? See, we're to walk the road together. We're to share our lives with one another. We are to be authentic with one another. We are to share ourselves with one another. But this is a warning to be careful of who you share your life with, who it is that you trust with you, with what is holy, with what is precious to you. Be careful who that is. Because just like a wild dog or a pig, they'll trample you. They'll come back and bite you. No matter how friendly the dog looks, don't put your hand down. It'll bite you. Pigs don't care for things. They wallow in them. We're to walk together, but let's not be foolish. Let's be wise. And who we are inviting in to our lives, who it is that we are walking with. And if you don't have the kind of relationship with somebody that you're going to walk this road, that you can trust them, that they're not a pig or a dog, and I know that sounds really offensive, doesn't it, when I say it that way, but you know what I mean, right? What he means. If they're not that person, then don't judge them. Because the relationship has to come first. And you can judge them all you'd like, but the speck is still there and they're not going to move it. And you don't see it very well anyway, because you don't see the complexity of who they are. And so establish the relationship first. Trust one another. Find those whom you know you can trust, who you can walk with, and then walk together. This passage, we take verse 1 out of context and we say, You can't judge me. Jesus says not to judge. You can't tell me what's right or wrong. It's not at all what he's saying, is it? That's not at all it. In fact, he's saying we should be helping one another with our specks and our beams, but we have to do so in the right way, with the right posture. This is not a call to keep our lives separate, to say, be faithful, but do it separately because we can't speak into each other's lives. That's not at all what he's saying. He's saying the exact opposite. He's asking us to come together, and to come together in humility and in grace, and in view of the cross, in view of the gospel and what he has done for us. And how can we be gospel ambassadors to one another? How can we love each other well? How can we be empathetic? How can we be generous with one another? How can we be gracious? How can we come alongside and walk the road knowing that we're going to be calling out the specks and the beams in one another's lives, and we can do so lovingly in the right ways? See, this passage really brings us back to Jesus. So we're going to take communion. We're going to finish with communion this morning. And guys, come on forward and go ahead and pass out the elements. As we take these elements mean something. I would encourage you that if you have placed your faith in Jesus, you are more than welcome to take communion with us. You don't have to be a member of this church. You just have to have believed in Jesus, to have placed your trust in him. And as we take these elements mean something. They represent something. They represent what he has done for us. In the same way that this beam, recognizing that every one of us have one of these, in the same way that this should humble us, those elements should as well. Because we realize without those elements, this beam is stuck. This beam's there. And we're just going to be lugging it around. And so when you get your elements, I'd encourage you just to take some time with God and ask him to reveal your beam. Ask him to reveal his grace. Worship him, thank him, praise him for his addressing of this. Go back to the cross to be humble, so that then as we start our relationships anew, we're at the right place. So go ahead and take a moment once you get your elements. So we hold this bread. This bread represents his body, which he gave for us, which he gave as a sacrifice for our sins, so that we could have a relationship with him, to bring us back together. And so as we hold this, we see a representation. We're reminded of the sacrifice needed to remove our log. Would you eat with me? And then the cup. cup represents his blood, which was shed for us, which established a new covenant, a new relationship that we have with him, one of grace. How important grace is when we realize we have a beam, don't we? So as we drink, we're grateful for grace. Father, I thank you for the beauty of this passage. Father, I thank you that you are gracious with us. I thank you that you desire nothing more than our transformation, our relationship with you. Father, I pray that as we sit here, we would see and better view ourselves. We'd realize our beams, and we'd come and ask for you to heal us, knowing that you forgive abundantly. Father, I pray for our relationships. I pray that we do not try to divorce our faith and our relationships, but we see the beauty of walking the road together. Father, I pray this would be a church that is different because of that, because of how we love one another, how we are faithful together. So, Father, I thank you for all of this, and I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.